Fide. Right now, you are doing something so automatic, so thoughtless, that your brain doesn't even register it as a decision. You're hydrated. You drank water today. Maybe a glass with breakfast. Maybe a bottle at your desk. Fide. Maybe you've got one sitting next to you right now, completely unremarkable, completely invisible. Just water. Just the thing you drink because you're a human being and human beings drink water. That's just what we do. Fide. Now I want you to hold that thought for a second, because for an enormous stretch of human history, for the vast majority of the time our species has existed on this planet, drinking plain water, just water, nothing added, nothing mixed, Fide, nothing boiled or treated or filtered, was genuinely, measurably, statistically likely to kill you. Not metaphorically, not eventually, quickly, horrifyingly, and the people who survived were, in large part, Fide, the ones who figured out that plain water was something you approached with caution, if you approached it at all. And the deeper you go into this, the stranger it gets, Fide, because it stops being a story about dirty water and becomes something much bigger. A story about how our ancestors actually stayed alive, what they drank instead, Fide, why the human body is built the way it is around certain liquids that aren't water, and why the thing sitting on your desk right now, clean, clear, safe, tasteless, Fide, is one of the most historically extraordinary substances a human being has ever consumed. That's the story today. Not a hygiene lecture, not a survival tip, a genuine, Fide, slowly unraveling mystery about the liquid your body is 60% made of, and the thousands of years during which drinking it straight was one of the more dangerous choices you could make, Fide. Let's start with what water actually was for most of human history. Because the water you drink has been through a process so elaborate, so engineered, so dependent on infrastructure that took centuries to build, Fide, that it barely resembles the water our ancestors encountered. Your water has been collected, transported, filtered, treated with chlorine or chloramine, tested, regulated, piped through sealed systems directly into your home, Fide, and it still sometimes fails. Boil water notices still happen. Pipes still leach things. Modern water treatment is genuinely one of the greatest public health achievements in human history, and it has existed, in the form we'd recognize, Fide, for roughly 150 years. Before that, water came from wherever water was. Rivers, streams, lakes, wells, springs collected rainwater, and every single one of those sources was, to varying degrees, alive, Fide. Not alive in a pleasant, thriving ecosystem kind of way. Alive in the sense that it was teeming with bacteria, parasites, viruses, animal waste, human waste, agricultural runoff, decomposing organic matter, Fide, and a rotating cast of microscopic things that would very much like to get inside your digestive system and begin the process of ending you. Cholera lived in water. Typhoid lived in water. Dysentery, Fide, the illness that killed more soldiers in almost every major war before the 20th century than actual combat, lived in water. Giardia, cryptosporidium, liver flukes, guinea worm, Fide. If you want to understand why our ancestors were not sitting around drinking tall glasses of fresh water with ice and a slice of lemon, start here, Fide. Start with the reality of what water actually was before we built the systems that made it safe. Now here's where it gets interesting, because the response to this wasn't to go thirsty. Humans cannot go thirsty, Fide. We are among the least drought-tolerant large mammals on the planet. 3 days without water and you're in serious trouble. So the question is never whether ancient humans drank liquids. The question is what liquids they chose, Fide. And the answer is one of the most quietly fascinating stories in all of human history. Explanation number 1. Beer. And not the beer you're thinking of. This is the explanation that makes people laugh when they first hear it, Fide, and then stops being funny approximately 30 seconds later when they realize how serious it is. For a very long time, across a very large portion of the ancient world, beer was safer to drink than water. Not stronger than water, Fide, not more enjoyable than water. Safer. Because the process of making beer, even crude ancient beer, involved boiling the liquid, and boiling kills things. The pathogens that made water lethal could not survive the brewing process, Fide. So what came out the other end was something you could actually drink without a meaningful chance of dying. Ancient Sumerian beer, some of the oldest we have evidence for, going back nearly 5,000 years, was thick, cloudy, Low in alcohol and nutritious in ways modern beer is not. It was drunk through reed straws to filter out the grain solids floating in it. Workers were paid in it. It was rationed by job type, with harder physical labor earning more. Children drank it. Elderly people drank it. It was not a luxury or a vice. It was hydration infrastructure. It was the solution a civilization found to the problem of water you couldn't trust. And it wasn't just Mesopotamia. The pattern shows up across ancient Egypt, where workers building the pyramids received beer allocations as part of their daily wage. Across medieval Europe, where monasteries brewed beer, and where the concept of drinking water from a local river without consequence was understood to be a gamble. Small beer, a very low alcohol version brewed specifically so people could drink it throughout the day without becoming incapacitated, was a daily staple from roughly the medieval period through the early industrial age. People drank it in the morning. They gave it to children. They consumed it at work. The alcohol content was low enough that impairment wasn't the issue. Safety was the point. Let that land for a moment. For centuries, the responsible parenting choice, the sensible hydration strategy, the common sense thing to do when your child was thirsty was to give them beer, because the alternative was water that might contain something that would kill them within a week. Explanation number 2. Fermentation beyond beer. If you zoom out from beer and look at the broader picture, what you find is that almost every culture that ever existed, on every continent, figured out independently that you don't drink water raw. You do something to it. And the thing you do, almost universally, is fermentation. Wine in the Mediterranean. Fermented mare's milk called kumis across the Central Asian steppe. Fermented grain drinks across Africa. Pulque, the fermented sap of the agave plant, in Mesoamerica. Fermented tea across parts of Asia. Chicha, a fermented corn drink across South America. Kvass, a fermented bread drink across Eastern Europe. You can go to almost any corner of the human map at almost any point in history, and you will find people who have taken whatever grows locally, added water, introduced fermentation, and produced a drink that is safer than the water they started with. This is not coincidence. This is not culture. This is survival, expressed through 10,000 different local ingredients, but following the same underlying logic. You change the water. You transform it. You make it into something that the pathogens swimming in it cannot survive. The specific drink varies endlessly. The principle is always identical, and what's fascinating is that no ancient culture sat down and figured this out through the germ theory of disease. Nobody in ancient Sumeria knew what bacteria was. Nobody brewing beer in medieval England understood microorganisms. They knew what they knew the way humans have always known things before science had language for it. They knew because the people who drank untreated water got sick and sometimes died. And the people who drank something fermented, something processed, something transformed, tended to survive. And survival is a very persuasive teacher. Explanation number 3. Tea, boiling, and the transformation of Asian hydration. Across large parts of Asia, the solution to the water problem took a different form. Not fermentation, but heat. And the drink that emerged from that solution became one of the most consumed beverages in human history. Tea began in China, with the earliest credible evidence pointing to several thousand years ago, though the mythology pushes it back much further. And whatever its origins, one of its core practical functions, particularly as it spread and became embedded in daily life, was that making tea required boiling water. The act of brewing tea was, at its foundation, an act of water purification dressed up in ceremony and flavor. This matters enormously. In regions where tea culture became dominant, where the daily rhythm of life organized itself around boiling water and steeping leaves, populations were consuming water that had been brought to temperatures high enough to kill the things that would otherwise kill them. Not because anyone had done a controlled study. Not because the connection between boiling and safety was explicitly understood, but because the ritual demanded it, and the ritual, over generations, kept people alive in ways they couldn't fully articulate but deeply felt. There's a version of this story playing out across human history over and over again. Practices that look like culture, like religion, like preference, like tradition, that turn out on close examination to be load-bearing survival mechanisms that a community had encoded into behavior before they had the vocabulary to explain why. Tea is one of the cleanest examples. The ceremony is real, the enjoyment is real, the social dimension is real, and underneath all of it, the reason it persisted across thousands of years and spread to become a cornerstone of entire civilizations is that it kept people from getting sick. Explanation number 4. The body itself and what it learned to run on. Here's something most people don't know. The human body has a complicated relationship with plain water. Not because water is bad for you. Water is essential. You are water, mostly. But the body doesn't just need liquid. It needs liquid plus electrolytes, plus minerals, plus specific compounds that help it actually absorb and use the water it receives. Drink pure water, especially in large quantities, and you can actually dilute your electrolyte balance. It's called hyponatremia. In extreme cases, it can kill you. Athletes have died from drinking too much plain water during endurance events without replacing sodium. And while ancient humans weren't running marathons with water bottles, their bodies were similarly calibrated to receive liquids that came packaged with other things. Milk from animals came with fat and protein and calcium. Fermented drinks came with nutrients from the grains or fruits used to make them. Broth from boiled meat and bones came with collagen and minerals. Even fruit, one of the primary liquid sources for many ancient populations, came with sugar and vitamins bundled into the hydration. Plain water, stripped of everything, was something the body could use, but it wasn't the primary delivery system that human physiology had calibrated itself around over hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. We evolved drinking from streams and rivers, yes, but also from the moisture in food, from fruit, from blood and marrow after a kill, from the liquid content of plants and roots and leaves. Hydration was not a separate activity with a dedicated vessel. It was woven into everything consumed, and it came with nutrients attached. Now we have to step back even further. Past the breweries of Mesopotamia, past the tea ceremonies of China, past the medieval small beer and the Andean chicha and the fermented mare's milk of the steppe. Back to the question underneath all of it. What did the very earliest humans drink? The ones with no clay pots, no fire control, no domesticated grains? The ones for whom agriculture was still tens of thousands of years in the future. And to answer that properly, we need to go somewhere that almost nobody thinks to look when they're asking questions about ancient hydration. We need to look at our closest living relatives, chimpanzees, gorillas, bonobos, our evolutionary cousins, separated from the human line by 5 to 7 million years, give or take. They have a relationship with water that is instructive in ways that should make you uncomfortable. Great apes in the wild drink water, but they don't drink it the way you drink it. They are selective about sources. They show strong preferences for moving water over still water, because moving water is less likely to be stagnant, less likely to have accumulated the microbial density that standing water develops. They drink from rain collected in tree hollows. They obtain enormous amounts of their hydration from food, from fruit, from leaves, from the moisture content of everything they eat. They also, and this is the part that matters, avoid sources they've learned are dangerous. Researchers studying wild chimpanzee populations have documented consistent avoidance of certain water sources, particularly those near areas of concentrated animal activity and waste. No germ theory, no scientific analysis, just learned behavior, passed down through observation, encoding the knowledge that some water is fine and some water is a threat. Our ancestors had the same instincts, sharpened, over millions of years, into something like water wisdom. A collection of behavioral rules around where to drink, when to drink, what to do with water before consuming it, that got layered and refined and culturally embedded long before anyone had a language sophisticated enough to explain the underlying biology. And then something happened that changed everything. Something that shifted the human relationship with water more dramatically than any invention before or since. Fire. Not fire as a source of warmth. Not fire as a cooking tool. Fire as water treatment. The moment some human ancestor, somewhere in the deep past, boiled water and noticed that water that had been boiled seemed safer than water that hadn't, was the moment the entire trajectory of human hydration changed. We don't know exactly when this happened. The controlled use of fire goes back at least 400,000 years, possibly significantly further. The deliberate boiling of water for safety, specifically for safety rather than for cooking, is harder to date. But the knowledge that heat changed water, that it made it something you could drink without consequence, became one of the most powerful pieces of survival knowledge our species ever accumulated. And it's